if a business is like, I feel like we have so much potential, but we're not optimizing it. Like the CEO's working 80 hours a week, but the team doesn't know what they should be doing, or there's friction, or there's lots of turnover because the CEO hasn't really had time to sit down and be like, let's talk about every single one of your jobs and how they interact with each other and who you report to and how you report to them. And, little things like that. There's so much opportunity to just kind of get away from the gray area and make it as black and white as possible. So then our people can really lean in to what they enjoy doing every day and what they're great at doing every day. So then the stuff that we have to do that we don't really love doing is just a little part of it instead of the whole thing. And it creates a lot more of an environment of growth and buy-in and retention. So then your team is actually growing alongside your business and you're able to make an impact, not only just for your clients, but also for the people that you manage.
Hey, we are back with a special conversation today with Kira from theparadigm.com. And this is such a beautiful conversation. I found myself as we went like, oh yeah, I've been in situations like that when I have been in work environments that were not totally aligned, or I was in a different season of life. And if you are thinking about building a team, if you are on a team that needs some help, or if you have a team that you are leading, Kira has some incredible thoughts for us. She's got a decade of experience in people operations in the corporate world, and she is no stranger to the sensitive issues involved in the human side of running a business. We are unique as humans, so stuff comes up. And yes, there's a lot to learn from hiring, onboarding, training, and managing the performance of over 500 employees for a multi-million-dollar business. She founded Paradigm to bridge the gap between corporate HR policies and the modern needs of online entrepreneurs. Because Google might have almost all the answers, but it doesn't have what your unique business and your unique team needs. In this conversation, we're talking about values and how to pull values through into action and bring them to life in your business. We're talking about working virtually with a team and what you might need to do before you hire a team, or check yourself if you've already got a team and you haven't done these things, or if you're seeing some breakdowns. This is going to be good, and I cannot wait to hear what nuggets you pull out in this episode and what you apply in your business and in your team. We're going to dig in. I'm going to let Kira kick it off by sharing a little bit more about her background and how she got to where she is today. Kira, welcome to this episode. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Me too. I love what you are up to. Can you share for everyone who's listening what you are all about and what you do?
Yeah. Well, in the short version is that maybe 5 or so years ago, I was actually, after working in small business for almost 10 years and managing a team of 50 and never delegating a thing in my life and taking everything on my plate, I got to the point of such a bad emotional, mental breakdown that I ended up being diagnosed with PTSD afterwards. So in long story short, I am super passionate about helping people, especially women, realize how many opportunities there are out there to get support and how much your bandwidth and your reach and your impact can expand when you approach life in a way that is open to delegation and teamwork and kind of meeting people halfway and the openness and the vulnerability that comes with that. And all of that has kind of manifested in translating my business experience in small business and in online business over to HR consulting. We call it people operations. I put it into Chat GPT the other day just to see what does ChatGPT think the difference between HR and people operations is? And it was kind of what we think, which is it's a holistic viewpoint. So when you're running your business, when you're thinking about it through a people operations lens, you're thinking about it from the operations side versus just I'm trying not to get sued side. So yeah, and it kind of opened up a lot of doors to work with lots of different entrepreneurs and people and to talk about this message. Because truthfully, I don't know if you have experience with this. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. But if I have a male client and I tell them, yeah, we need to hire somebody to take this on, this is not your responsibility, they are like, okay, But if I have a female client, they're like, no, it's okay. I can fit a 20 hour a week job in my day. No big deal. So it kind of hit the jackpot.
So true. I have to even catch myself sometimes, even though like I have an incredible team that I get to work with, and still I'm like, oh, I can do that. No, Amber, you do like slow down and check with team too. Cause sometimes the team are like, yeah, throw it on over. So we kind of have to watch for each other. And there's interesting research. Have you ever read the book Business Brilliant?
I haven't. No, I actually haven't.
Super great book. If you are listening and you have not read this book yet, I have absolutely talked about it before, but I highly recommend it. A friend of mine, Lewis Schiff, wrote this book, and it's the research really about middle class and self-made millionaires and billionaires and different mindsets that we have as we are creating careers and businesses. And it is definitely a DIY. It's a middle class mindset that keeps DIY in it too. Like, I've got that. I can do it. I can learn that. Versus self-made millionaires and billionaires are much more likely to say, let me bring in the expert.
Oh, I love this. I've been needing something to cite, so I will definitely be looking into that. Most of the books that are recommended to me are like a little bit more old school, like leadership advice from like older dudes that like don't really get the new way of working, so I love to hear that there's different ways to think about it that are a little bit more clinical, but also I can't wait. Would you say it's called Business Brilliant by Lewis Schiff?
You got it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Writing it down.
So good. I can't wait to hear what you think of it.
Yeah.
So good. I read it years ago, and it shifted my perspective a lot on how we show up and how we serve and how we build businesses. Now, I'm curious, your business, the small business that you mentioned, what was that?
So I still work there now. Technically, I'm the COO, but I only show up once a week and manage my team of managers and directors. But we are a private indoor swim school focused on infants and toddlers for drowning prevention. And here in San Diego, it's a really competitive industry. There's like 30 swim schools just in our county alone. But there's like tens of thousands all over the country. And so it was such a funny thing to like fall into after my corporate career. But I always think that we don't, especially if you're a small business owner or you have a smaller team or whatever, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. Whereas when I was in corporate, I was very siloed. And so I knew a lot about one thing. So I think that's what kind of I like to joke that I just didn't want to be in a cubicle. So I would have taken a, 80% pay cut and done anything to stay out of the cubicle. But it ended up being the greatest experience because I could decide, oh, I want to know more about this, or I want to learn more about that. And if you have an empowering boss, then, it kind of takes you through that whole journey and you can learn as much as you want about anything.
It's so true. I'm curious about how you fell into this.
So we talked about this a little bit offline, but I went to school in Santa Barbara. I played water polo there, but I started competitive swimming when I was 5. So I've always just loved being in the water, loved being near the water. And when I was trying to escape my corporate job, I had convinced a few of my friends to basically quit in 6 months or something like that and travel through Europe. But I literally couldn't stand to be at this corporate job anymore. So I just looked up part-time jobs that I could do so that like my soul wouldn't die in the meantime, while we were saving money, like on the side after going to this like terrible soul sucking job all day. And there was a swim school like 2 miles away and they were just looking for instructors, and they were able to like give me a few classes here and there. And essentially once I spent the summer there, I got to quit my other job a little bit early, hang out, like have adult summer break when I was like in my mid-20s. And we traveled. When I came back, they were like, yeah, we still need you while you're getting back on your feet. I mean, I came back from backpacking through Europe after 3 months with literally $12. And that's only because my mom forced me to because I wanted to do it all on my own back then. I was like, I'm not taking any money from my parents. But my mom was like, you can't fly across the country with, negative $30 in your bank account. So I'm giving you $100. And I was like, oh my God. So when I came back, I was so broke. I was like, fine, I'll work here for a while I look for a new job, probably in sales, that kind of a thing. And it ended up like I had a fork in the road. Like I had to decide at some point, like, do I want to keep going with this small business where I get to make such an impact, and they were offering me managerial roles and lots of different opportunities versus like, making 3 times as much money jumping back into corporate. And it was just, I just remember it being such a big decision. It was so long ago now, over 10 years, but I was like, it's just such a big decision to make. And for my like young brain that came back from traveling that had no money, I'm so glad that I went the harder route because I would have bound that company that I originally had gotten the other offer for had like since gone out of business. It was a startup. It was an app. It probably would have meant more corporate trauma, like the whole thing. So I'm just so happy that I took the harder, more poor route for a while. Just all the things I've learned. So
I love your journey and your story. Okay. And I'm going to ask one more question about your past before we re-enter the present day. And what were you doing in corporate?
I was working for a for-profit university, like a University of Phoenix type thing.
Okay.
And it was like left college. Somebody was like, oh, they hire everyone here, just work here with us. And it ended up being, we called it like, well, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it was like a club, like literally like I made so many friends still to this day. I met my husband the very first day of my training. Didn't know he was going to be my husband at the time. Like we didn't like immediately start dating or anything. I was like very committed to being single. I just graduated college, you know? But it was so high pressure, so toxic. So like we had directors that would just like slam their laptops on people's hands if they were taking notes too loud in meetings. Like it was just like the quintessential, like horrible place where as a 23-year-old super high performer, I was crying on my way home from work every night while like 45-year-old men were getting praised and they were producing like a fourth of what I was producing in front of people. And so it was just it was about 3.5, 4 years. And I had switched departments at a certain point where I went into more retention and training and helping the sales team learn how to retain their people and train the managers. And so that kind of lent itself to me getting my master's in organizational management. And I love to say that it was just like this is not how it should be. So how should it be at the same time that I was working at this company? And of course, the reason you stay in those companies is because they were paying for my degree, that I was in a good position. I was young and it was like fun and I had all these friends around, but then I was being tortured with my actual job every day. So it's really crazy to like have this reaction of like, I'm going to go make $12 or $13 an hour and teach swim lessons every day. And that'll be better. Even if I can't eat, like that will be better than all of this. So I feel like I've really dragged that energy through my career, just like trying not to have to recreate that stuff. And it's really hard to do, especially when you're in small business, balancing so many different things going on. But, you know, like I said, long story long, I feel like I took so much from that experience and just, I know that work can be fun and you can enjoy it and you can love the people that you work with. You can be friends with the people that work for you. Like you can have all those things. It doesn't have to be like this weird thing that like is like, don't get too close to people. Like that's not what life's about. I don't know. So we're trying to challenge it a little bit. And I think if you're smart and you're intuitive and you pay attention to yourself and you develop yourself, like you can have whatever relationships you want with your team and it's not going to be a toxic environment. So that's how I'm here.
Could not agree more. I am so loving your journey. I'm loving that you took that intentional break, knowing like, all right, I'm not going to make what I was making, but I'm going to get to the right place. I'm going to just take a beat in here because I feel like in this moment in time that we are in, we all move at a very fast pace. Everything is moving at a rapid fire pace. And there is a lot that is lost because we don't have the space and the time to process, think, be still, to make big decisions like this. So I just love that you took the time to do that. And it turned into something so incredible. So the companies and the projects that you work on now, what do they look like in the people operations space? Because this you mentioned and Chat GPT confirmed, like this is a little bit more nuanced, right? As we think about HR, talent management, or these other terms that are used to describe the people in how we work with people in organizations. So can you give us some tangible examples of like, all right, this is what we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, that's the unique thing about it is that we've been able to dabble in all sorts of different businesses. So whether it's a business hiring an employee for the first time and trying to navigate the contractor versus employee rules and laws, and maybe they've gotten in trouble and they're going back and trying to restart, or bigger businesses that have hired employees, but then have not really structured things in a way that everybody is giving their most, the most or the best that they can, because they're not clear on what their responsibilities are. There's a place for our services kind of in all of those places. It just kind of depends on what the business needs. And usually they don't know. So if a business is like, I feel like we have so much potential, but we're not optimizing it. Like the CEO's working 80 hours a week, but the team doesn't know what they should be doing. Or the team is there's friction, or there's lots of turnover because the CEO hasn't really had time to sit down and be like, let's talk about every single one of your jobs and how they interact with each other and who you report to and how you report to them. And, little things like that. There's so much opportunity to just kind of get away from the gray area and make it as black and white as possible. So then our people can really lean in to what they enjoy doing every day and what they're great at doing every day. So then the stuff that we have to do that we don't really love doing is just a little part of it instead of the whole thing. And it creates a lot more of an environment of growth and buy-in and retention. So then your team is actually growing alongside your business, and you're able to make an impact not only just for your clients, but also for the people that you manage. Because providing a place that's safe, and that's where the HR piece comes in, because our special sauce is the compliance. We'll build your company policies, make sure they're informed by your culture that you want to have. People think you just download an employee handbook and then you talk about your company culture in meetings, but they are one and the same. So the things that you are holding your people accountable to are the things that build your culture. So I think that's where every business can really benefit from that clarity and that distinction, and that kind of like taking a step back and looking at it from a high level perspective in order for their people to understand the little things that they should be doing every day. But if you're constantly just worrying about replacing people, you're never actually building a culture, because culture is built by people, not by pieces of paper and, what you're selling or whatever your footprint is in the world or whatever the case may be. And so we really want to look at it from a perspective of what's optimized for the company, but also what's going to keep the people engaged. And sometimes that means those people aren't going to be the right fit, but shying away from those discussions is what creates toxic work cultures. And that sort of undermines everything that you've put into your business in the first place. So
this is so good. And I mentioned before we kicked off the recording, we didn't talk too much before. It was getting good. I'm like, we got to hit record. This frequently happens. And I'm like, whoa, stop, hold, save it all. And I was mentioning that like the things that you are talking about, I am so on board with. And I think that one of the challenges is that when we're in small business, we might think, oh, it doesn't apply to me, or, oh, I can wait on this, but by waiting on thinking about, okay, what are everyone's roles and responsibilities, including mine as yours as a business owner, and your team or your OBM or even VA, like what are we all doing? And if you take a beat and really say, all right, this is what we're all responsible for. Okay, here are our KPIs, and here's how we work together, and here's where things interact. And we recommend something called a project charter before each new project. And at the beginning of working relationships, sit down and define project charter, how we work together, meaning how do you like to communicate? Where are we going to update on to-dos? What if things go wrong? Like, what do we do then? So what are we responsible for? But also, how do we do the work? Because it makes everything so much easier. So as you think about like small business, and I want to sort of break this down because there are big business concepts, but we want to pull from them and use them in small business too. And I've just caught the eye of your pup back there again. He went back to his position.
She's always involved somehow.
Oh my gosh, so cute. So as a small business, let's take a small business that is business owner and one team member. How do you apply these principles when it's just like me and my right hand, my best connection on the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you ask that because I actually think that it's way more important to define these relationships when it is a smaller team than even when there is a bunch of people involved. And that's because you are everything to the business and you're everything to the team, which means that you can accidentally silo yourself into a situation that's super uncomfortable for your team member. And that's going to, in turn, be a really huge problem for your business because if you've got two people working in your business and you're acting as a true CEO, they're probably doing most of the work and the delivery for what is actually making money for your business. And if you're creating an environment where they either don't know what's expected or you're accidentally, we call it toxic flexibility. And we get this a lot from modern CEOs that are trying to figure out what it means to have a team in this day and age. And after there's been, I think COVID sped us up by a decade in regards to remote work. And so we're all trying to figure it out. There's nothing to be ashamed of, but we think for some reason we're supposed to know how to be a leader and a manager just because we hired somebody. But we call it toxic flexibility because the CEOs are like, this is what I would want. I want to have, completely flex schedules or Fridays off or, client meetings only in the mornings or, whatever the case may be. And sometimes that thing that we think is flexibility doesn't really work for a team member because they don't really understand when they should be showing up, when they should be carving out the time. A really good example is we had a client that had a part-time employee and they were like, yeah, you can work whenever you want. But this employee they were the one that scheduled the call with us. They were like, yeah, I really love my job, but I'm never off because my boss will contact me or text me at any time. And the boss on their side is like, you can work whenever you want. You have to answer when I call. And so it creates a little bit of a toxic relationship because the only way out of it is for that person to go to HR, but they're the only employee. So who are they going to go to? And then it's awkward because they're like, hey, friend who I heard about on Instagram, can you pitch my boss? Because I don't want them to know, and then we get a lot of inquiries and different meetings with different CEOs and they have the best of intentions. Like this CEO wants her person to feel like I can be an adult and make my own schedule, but it creates a situation where neither of them know what's really expected of them. And so then when you really get down to it, the CEO is frustrated too, because they're like, well, I am entitled to all of your time because I'm entitled to none of your time. And so it just kind of creates this bad circle that we don't realize. At the end of the day, the CEO is like, I just want this to work for you. I know I trust you. That's what they think that they're doing. But meanwhile, the employee has their phone always on. They're never actually able to walk away from it. They don't want to disappoint their boss. They want to move up in the company. They want to be promoted. They want to have full-time hours. They want to get a raise. So they're trying to constantly show that they're going over and above, but there's no boundaries. And it just creates such an awkward situation. And the thing is, for us, we can't just CEOs, meaning like the people in charge, we can't just quit our company, but our people can quit. And sometimes they're going to find a way to leave instead of having those hard conversations. So we really think that even if you have a team of 2 or 3, or you have a couple contractors, a couple employees, there really should be solid expectations laid out there, even if it's just a couple little guidelines and a way for your team to seek support instead of quitting. Because there's 1,000 different jobs out there calling their name every single day. So we want to make sure that we're the person that they not only want to work for, but also the company with the values that they can stand behind and they feel like they're making an impact every day. And we do that through our cultures.
This is so good. And I think it's such a great example. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation in the last, 5 or so years, even in small business, about values, right? Yeah. And pull your values through and Delivering Happiness was one of the first books I read about values and bringing values to life. Mm-hmm. And I think you are bringing to light such a great example here of, okay, we've got a core value of flexibility, maybe, but we got to define it. What does that look like? Because I've been in that place that the team member who reached out to you, can you pitch so-and-so please? Yeah. And I've been there and it's like, you're always on And as soon as you get the text message, it's like, okay, alert, because I value flexibility. So I want to be flexible when they message. Okay. But the adrenaline immediately for me would kick in. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot live like that. And now I have to put my phone on DND. Otherwise, even when my team reaches out, because there's most of my team, is still awake and working when I am winding down for the day. It's like, okay, DND, because I'll pop right back up myself. And of course, it's normal business hours for everyone else. So I don't want to say like, no more work.
That's such a good point. It's more important for us sometimes to just not only to set an example of like what we're comfortable with and what we are going to how we are going to show up for our team, because otherwise it's already hard to turn it off when you're a manager or you own the company or anything like that. You're always, your mind's always working. You're always thinking of ideas. Like you never know when it's going to be Saturday at 11 a.m. and you finally think of the name of your course or whatever, so I feel like it's really important for us to, as leaders, to preserve our energy and our energetic space that where and how we show up. Otherwise, we're going to be halfway all the time. And I mean, one of my employees who is like my right hand at Paradigm, my company, I don't text her at all, ever. We always are on Slack. It's a rule that I made right when I started my business. If it's about business, we're talking on Slack, unless it's an emergency, in which case I get a text, twice in the year and a half she's worked for me. Or it's like something funny and social and it's a meme or something like that. But even then, I'm trying not to text her because I don't want her to have that cortisol spike of, why is my boss texting me? What did I forget? That kind of a thing. Like we have to be really picky and choosy about an understanding of the impact that we have on the people that work for us. And I think that sometimes we forget they're reliant on us for their living. They're reliant on us for money, for the way that they interact with the world. And it may not feel like that every day when you're just reassigning tasks to them or, popping into Slack or, shooting them a quick message or asking them to go over and above for a client or something like that. We may just think like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just work. But really like that's their livelihood. And the impact we have can either be net positive or it can be net negative. And if it goes in the negative, you can bet that they're going to be looking for a way out because they're not going to have that conversation with you. It's not their job. It's not their job to show up as a leader and be like, you listen, you need to lead better, so we got to take it on ourselves.
So good. You also mentioned the virtual elements of this and the 2020 season and beyond totally raced this in for so many organizations. But a lot of people in small business, and especially in the online world, were already working, right, remote and maybe doing it well and maybe not. And I think we've all got an opportunity to learn, all right, how do we connect? So what recommendations and strategies do you have? I mean, you already said one, like Slack, like define where you're communicating and how you're communicating. I love that. Keep it social in text, unless it's an emergency. Yeah. And if you've got a social relationship or Slack, but how do you go about setting up, the virtual work environment?
Well, I think you have to touch on a few different things. There has to be a way to communicate and to offer support. There also has to be a way to actually assign the tasks and assign the work. And usually that's not the same place. So if you have a project management system or you assign work via email or whatever the case may be, those should feel different. Where you're communicating shouldn't just be like a, place where people are going to go to find their tasks. It should be a place where they could go to find support and leadership and communicate with each other and build relationships. So even for us with our clients, all of our deliverables are totally separate from the way that we communicate with them because we want them to feel like it's an open conversation and there's updates about their project, but there's also like, hey, have you seen anything lately that has, drawn your attention to it? Or is there anything that you're worried about? Or before we log off for the weekend. We usually do this on Thursdays. Let us know, like, if there's anything that's like weighing on you or that you're waiting for that we can clarify, those types of things. When you're kind of business to business or business to client, you want to have those types of conversations too. but especially when it comes to your team. And I think the other thing is an actual time to sit down and meet face to face, either with each individual person or with the team as a whole, or both, depending on how big your team is. I always joke because there's so much literature out there. Even in my course, there's a whole chapter on how to have a good meeting and how to get the most out of people and how to make sure that you're showing up in support for them. But our team meetings are truthfully just kind of hanging out. Like, hey, what's going on with the clients? Hey, did you see this happen? Like, did you guys watch the most recent episode of Love is Blind? It's very like an hour of blocked off time. There's kids running in and out. Like, it's very much a cultural team building environment. It's not that productive. Like if there are questions and things like that, we put together a plan to get them solved or answered, or I'll pop them back up to my to-do list or whatever. And there's space for that, of course. But really, like, our team meetings are more about the connection and the connectivity with each other versus like, what are the tasks that we have to do? And, there's some people that like to kick it off with like their win for the week or whatever. Like, our team has never, like, it kind of just feels like a chore. Like, we're like, well, I don't know. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that's going on. Like, we just kind of, I want there to feel like an easy chemistry and a vulnerability and, like talking about what's been going on. If you've been going to therapy, if you've learned anything recently, like if there's a system that isn't working that well, like we have an AI system. It takes down notes and it gives us action items. They are the funniest notes ever. Like I joke about them every single time. There's never anything productive in them. And I think that in corporate or even the stuff that we hear out there, it's like, oh, well, nobody wants to go to a meeting that doesn't have a point. And I'm like, well, the biggest point is to make sure that you're building your culture. So some people might think this is really bad advice. This may not work for every business, but your business can be a place that you show up and you show up in person. And when you are spending the time doing that, it's literally to build these relationships with people. It doesn't always have to be about productivity. And I think we missed that in the virtual space somewhere. Like I worked remotely about half the time prior to COVID. But when I was working remotely, it was because I needed to focus. And that was what my time away from the office was. When I was in the office, it was about connecting with the staff and connecting with the people. So in a virtual space, you're always in focus mode unless you're connecting with your people. So it always just kind of felt a little off to me that we were having meetings that were so focused on productivity. And sometimes that was the only time we were all in the same virtual room together. So I just kind of threw it out the window. I'm like secretly like writing this, like, here's how to have a really productive meeting for like all of our mentees and all of our students. And then on the other side, I'm like, what's up, guys? And we're just going to chat for an hour, and it's like not a thing. We also don't work. We don't work Monday mornings. So this is an exception. Because it's a Monday morning right now. And we don't work Friday afternoons. And what I've noticed is by not having client meetings at all on Fridays and holding that boundary for the entire team, it gives them space to, if we have true flexibility, they actually do have a little bit of a rollover time. So we front load our weeks. So then the end of the week, it feels like things peter off. And so it really has helped prevent burnout, especially when we're really busy or we have a bunch of new clients coming in, or, the HR side of things isn't always that fun. And so having our consultants have to have these tough conversations with people or be in on it when somebody is getting fired and, all of that good stuff. Nobody wants to do that on a Friday. So we generally have kind of set up these boundaries that I thought would be really productive and helpful for our mental health. And if they want to go out of the way, they're not getting extra praise for it. Like, I'm not going to be like, wow, great job, Kylie, for having a meeting on a Friday. Like, if you want to do that, fine. But I'm not going to be like, awesome job. Like, if anything, I'm going to be like, try to fit that in on Thursday. Like, let's work on the time management, because we really do have to make sure that we're leading by example and holding people accountable, not to overworking and overstressing and overdoing it, but to our culture and the standards that's what we should be praising people for, not just that they've worked for 80 hours. Like, screw that. Like, we're not doing that here. So
again, you bring it back to the values, right? If we say we value that, okay, winding down on a Friday, so you have space before you roll into the weekend, which I hugely value. Are you honoring and inviting and encouraging that, or are you encouraging a different behavior? And an example came to mind that someone recently shared with me. Their company was consistently sharing and saying, quality over quantity, quality, it's not about how long you're working. It's not about the hours, but anytime someone worked long hours, they would celebrate it. They're like, so-and-so was up till 2 a.m. when they sent us their email. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's such a contrast. And, I was one in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of those people who was up so late. I'm like, I can do it. I can fit it in. It was fun. I had the energy apparently at the time. I don't know where it came from, but
that's the thing. Like, to your point, like that's exactly the reason that we have to set a new standard, because it's not sustainable. Like, yeah, when you're in your 20s and your job is to work really hard and figure out what your career path is, like that's kind of your purpose. Like, what are my next steps? What am I growing towards? What am I developing towards? But then you get into your 30s, or you decide to have kids, or you have a family, or you have other businesses or other hobbies that you're pursuing. It really is not helpful for a business or for an individual to praise that being our only thing. Like, it's totally fine if that is what's fulfilling an employee to work at random hours, or, whatever the case may be, as long as they're hitting their deadlines, that's totally fine. But that's not going to be more valuable than the person that's fitting it into the time when we're all online, or, whatever the case may be. Like, I don't know. It's really hard to, especially as a woman, and you're thinking about we're thinking about having kids and getting into that place. Like, I would have really appreciated like anyone modeling this behavior when I was growing up, but I was modeled behavior of 24-hour work cycle, bothered at any moment, even when you're on vacation. That's the way you get ahead. That's the way you support yourself. That's the way you support your family. And it's been a tough journey to unlearn that. I mean, there's been a lot of therapy involved.
Yeah, I so get it. And I think a couple of things have happened recently. Number one, sort of going back to the 2020 season that extended for quite a while. Then we came out of that and we get back to normal, and we're in this season of normal. And I'm really observing a lot of people and specific generations saying, wait, we don't want normal. We don't want it to be like that. That was our normal. Like, we've really got to start to change it up. And I'm seeing more and more companies at a large scale level also recognize and say, wait, we put such an emphasis on engagement and productivity, right, for the sake of work. But what about the person? Are they thriving? Are they doing well? And for years there were wellness initiatives, but it was all in the sake of saving money, and it was in the sake of productivity, right? But I think this is shifting now. And I think upcoming generations and people overall, after what we went through, are saying, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, I'm seeing people in their 20s who are saying, that's all well and good. Like, okay, that you did that. Like, they could do that, but I'm going to choose to have a little bit more. I don't know if it's balanced, or I'm going to choose to have a little bit more separation. I'm really going to honor some of that downtime, which I think is ultimately going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, there's definitely something when I think people have asked me before too, like, you have a full-time job. Like, why is this business so important to you? Like, in my full-time job, I don't want to glorify it and act like I'm working 40 hours a week and doing this. Like, I am there one day a week. I built these foundations. I have a relationship with my boss. It's more of a partnership. I'm not going to say, oh, I look at all these amazing things. It's like, no, I'm there literally on Wednesdays all day. You won't catch me on Slack with my business, but I'll be there in person. I'm developing my managers. I'm developing my team, spending time with them. We have lunch, I'll eat really bad food, the whole thing. But there is something that when people ask me, like, well, when it's hard for your business, why keep going? Like, when you have tough clients, when you make a tough sales month, I'm paying multiple people's salaries. Like, that's a lot of pressure. And it's like, because I'm so fulfilled by it. And I think that if we're able to find people that are fulfilled by their work and the conversations that they're having, not only is it more energizing for them, but it doesn't feel like they're working when they are being productive. They just feel like they're contributing to their own growth. And that's why finding aligned talent and being so upfront about your values and your mission is so important, because then it doesn't always feel like what we've been taught work should feel like. So I'm really lucky in that I learned this lesson about 5 or 6 years ago, the hard way. And now my goal is just to make sure that work is fun and I enjoy my people and I enjoy my time, and I take radical accountability for the environment that I'm showing up in, not only in person, but also virtually, and creating that same space and having tough conversations, vulnerable conversations. Like, sticking your neck out a little bit sometimes to make sure that even if you, and we all have that feeling where we're like, am I doing a bad job at this? Like the last thing I want to hear is that I'm a bad boss. That's all the last thing anybody wants to hear. But if something's off, like approach it right away. Apologize if you put your foot in your mouth. Do what you have to do in order to make sure that you're taking that radical accountability and opening up a space of vulnerability for your team, no matter how big it is. There's no space for ego when it comes to managing a virtual team. I think it's because there is so much space for ego. We can't allow even a little bit of it to slip in because it will literally poison everything. It's the same thing as like when you get somebody on your team that maybe interviewed really well and said all the right things and did all the right things, but you can tell like really quickly, like, ooh, this just isn't a good fit. They're probably not a toxic person. It's just not the right fit, but keeping them there and not taking action and not being, stepping into real leadership and taking ownership of the environment in which the whole team works in is going to cause a huge issue for your team in the long run. And I think that that's where the HR part kicks in because people don't know what they can say, what they're allowed to say, all of that good stuff. So there's a real crossover between the confidence that comes from understanding your legal and ethical obligations as a leader, but also being okay with being like, I think I might have screwed this up a little bit, or I think I might have made a bad choice, or I might have made a choice in haste or out of desperation. How can I fix it? Instead of just like, oh, let's just see how it, blows up behind the scenes. That's just going to drag the rest of your team down with it. So it's really hard online. It's really hard virtually, but that's what we're trying to build, like a more open environment where people can understand you're not supposed to be good at all this leadership stuff out the gate. You're going to make mistakes even when you're great at it. So it's okay. Just like making sure we have a community that we can lean on is also really important too.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. I want to go back to something you said a bit ago, which was you have an AI taking notes.
Oh yeah.
What is the AI that you've got taking notes? I know people will be curious about this.
So it's called Otter AI. And I've had a few clients that have like hopped on Zoom calls or I'd be on a sales call or something. And I'm like, there's this like random note taker there or whatever, but it's so fun. There's like, when I tell you nothing productive happens in our team meetings, like I don't, like to me, it doesn't feel productive, but I'm sure to the team it does because they're getting their questions answered and stuff. But it gives you like a bullet point. They're just kind of like another person in the Zoom room, basically. And it gives you a bullet point summary and then like a list of action items that's emailed to every participant in the meeting at the end. And it's just ridiculous every time. Like, it is like if any of your audience actually like, and your listeners actually use it, like please screenshot it and send it to me on Instagram because it's so funny. Like you just don't realize the tangents that you go on. And then of course, in between there are questions like, oh, hey, how did you want me to handle this? Or, hey, how did you want me to deal with this problem? Or I think this automation might be off, or, like all that kind of just gets like woven in. And then it's like, we get a couple things we have to do at the end that are problems we have to solve that I don't think come up in the normal like meeting agenda, but it's just so funny. It's called Otter AI. I think it's like $100 a year. Totally worth it. Even just for the comedy.
Oh my gosh, that's so good for the comedy. Oh my gosh, Kira, this was amazing. Before we wrap, any final words of wisdom or things for people to consider as they're working with teams, working virtually, building teams, all the good stuff?
Oh gosh. I think one of the things that I feel like is just on repeat all the time is that we don't have to recreate what we think it's supposed to be like at work or what we think it's supposed to be like as a leader. That's a big one. Like you can have your work and your job and your company feel however you want it to feel. Even if you're just a middle manager, like you might be not just because that's truly the hardest job in the world. But if you're a manager, then you don't own the business. Maybe you're not in charge of the culture. Your team can have its own culture too. So being able to show up in a way that is really clear and straightforward and that you are asking for clarity and expectations to the best that you can and providing that to others. Even in my personal life, it comes into play, just making sure that there's clarity across the board. And also, if you have to ask for help about management or leadership, that's not a place of shame. That's a place of strength. I think that that's one thing, especially with women. It's like, Well, everyone don't confuse likability with leadership. And I think that you can be well loved and well liked, but still want to make sure that you're honing in on those leadership skills, especially when it comes to management, because to a lot of people, it feels like a dirty word, but it's truly I hear this the most from any team members. I love my boss, but they don't know what they're doing. And I wish they did, because they have so much potential. And it's like, they want to be led. They want to be shown the path. Like, they want the clarity, and don't be afraid to ask for it. It's not a place of shame. It's a great place of vulnerability and strength.
Oh, good. Where do people find you?
This has been so fun, Amber.
I agree. Where can people find you after this episode?
Well, Instagram is where I generally hang out the most, and that my company is called The Paradigm. So it's got 2 M's at the end. And we have all these cool freebies and resources and stuff on our website, which is the-paradigm.com. And then I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn. So if anybody's on LinkedIn, make sure you friend me. Let me know that you listen to the episodes. What encourages me to keep showing up there. But I just get so many bots. On LinkedIn, I feel like they're always trying to sell me stuff. They're like, I saw your website and it's really bad. And I'm like, first of all, how dare you? It's literally stunning. Get out of here.
It's stunning. Go check it out, everybody. It is stunning. Did you even look?
I know. How dare you? Like, random dude from like England or whatever. I don't know. They're always some weird bot. And I'm like, are you real? Anyway, yeah, that's my rant.
Oh my gosh, I love it. LinkedIn, Instagram, and the website for all the cool freebies, and to just check it out because it's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I cannot wait. If you're listening to this episode and you got a nugget, tag us in, leave a review. We can't wait to hear from you on Instagram or wherever you are hanging out. Love up your team. Stay vulnerable. It comes from a place of strength. Wise words. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.